I'm going to try and bring a little bit of Brittany into today's presentation, but really what I wanted to focus around is this sort of concept of human plus machine. There's been obviously a lot of talk about this already. I think I said to Rebecca after her presentation, she stole half of what I was going to talk about today. I am going to take a slightly different spin on it though, and I want to kind of start initially with a quote actually from a gentleman by the name of Nick Bostrom, who's a Swedish philosopher and also the founder of the Future of Humanity Institute from Oxford University. And it's a kind of controversial statement, and it's this. It's that essentially machine intelligence will be the last invention that humanity will ever need to make. So that in itself is quite controversial, but I'm going to let that sit with you for a little bit. And don't let that freak out with you, because it's going to finish on a quote with about a bit of hope at the same time. Now, I've just come back from HR Tech conference over in Las Vegas a few weeks ago. My wife thinks that I'm just on a perpetual bucks party because I've been in Amsterdam about a month before that, but that was for work as well. It's been brilliant. I won't talk about you two at the Sphere. Have a chat to me at lunch though. It was unbelievable. But I want to share just a few different trends and insights that TQ is seeing both locally here, but also across the globe as well. And some of these are from the tech conference itself. So first thing is probably really an acknowledgement about the fact that we are still very much living in a VUCA world right now. We were talking about this only internally yesterday in a all-hands meeting about the level of uncertainty that we're all kind of facing, both in our work lives, but also in our personal lives as well. Probably a couple of key pieces there is what we're seeing geopolitically, but also the fact of the matter that here in Australia, there's about 36% of occupation in Australia are still sitting at skill shortages right now. Likewise, burnout is a real issue still. So I think some of the data is saying there's around about 62% of employees are feeling completely burnt out. And at the same time, CEOs are putting a lot more pressure on employees to return back into the office. And in fact, that stat is 69% of CEOs want to see full return to work, 5 days a week, back in the office in 3 years' time. So it's pretty narrow-sighted, right? So we're all loving the fact of work from home, and actually, if anything, we're probably more productive around it as well. And obviously, the complete ongoing increase around legislation around AI, and I'll talk more about that. The other part to this trend is really around the human deal as well. And I think Caroline talked about it really well around the laws of attraction and what we're seeing from what candidates are looking for. But the key piece here is that they're really looking for a lot more focus around their expectations of work, but also the type of experiences they're looking for, both once they're in the job, but also about when they're looking for a job as well. At the same time, from a technology perspective, more and more of our customers who come to us, coming to us from a tech perspective anyway, with the same common problem. We're sitting on a Workday, we're sitting on a SuccessFactors, we're sitting on an Oracle, we're in TA, and we freaking hate it. We cannot do our jobs. All right, so find me something else. Tell me what I should buy. So really it's a conversation around whether we want to replace something, augment something, or actually integrate it much more effectively than what we are at the moment. There's a lot of talk about AI. I'm going to talk a bit more about that in a bit more detail a bit later, but it's getting more and more sophisticated, and more products are tapping into other AI tools out there in the market to amplify their capability within their current products as well. And there's an ongoing focus around skills, and likewise a lot of category convergence happening as well. And it's not just categories within sort of HR tech where particular verticals are coming together and now sitting under one area. That's mainly through a lot of acquisitions, but actually industries where HR tech and fintech are now coming together as well to actually provide a much more holistic view on the workforce. And the final point would be around, and one of the key things, Gareth asked me about what was the key things coming from HR tech, and it was essentially skills, and AI. That was essentially every talk track, I think, over 5 days. But the reality is that the market is moving towards wanting to be more focused on skills, getting rid of a focus on necessarily going to market for title, thinking a lot more about the skills and the competencies of their workforce and how do we improve that internally. Co-pilots are becoming more and more prevalent, and they will become a lot more prevalent, particularly as Microsoft brings a lot more of it directly within their own products. So it's pretty overwhelming, right? So surely this is where technology starts to come in and help us. And look, the reality is technology has been helping us for a long time. We've been going through different ages and looking at through the industrial age and the machine age and space and internet age, and we're really now in this augmented age. And it's a really exciting period of time. The reality is it's been with us for ages. We're largely thinking about utilisation of technology in our day-to-day. That buzzer that happened at the end of NASA's presentation, that was my Apple Watch buzzing, so apologies about that. So that was an augmentation of annoyance. But the reality is that you're seeing a lot more technology coming into our day in, day out. One day, it might look like this. And if Elon Musk has got anything to do with it, that's exactly what it's going to look like. And hopefully, it's not going to look like this. And that may be what Elon Musk looks like in the future as well. So what's the right technology solution? Well, the fact of the matter is, it's overwhelming. There is over 30,000 HR technology products globally across the market. In TA Tech alone, between 3,000 to 5,000 technologies there. This is just a snapshot of a bunch of different technologies that we believe are really fantastic solutions. TQ's always prided itself on being completely agnostic when it comes to technology. But this is a really interesting snapshot when you look at it purely through the talent lens and largely with a heavy focus around TA, for you guys as well. The reality is, though, that on average, the number of TA technologies, and when I say technologies, I'm also thinking about digital platforms as well, so your job boards and your talent marketplaces out there you tap into. On average, it's around about 18 plus that are sitting in an organisation. I was sitting at a dinner party in Vegas, I asked this exact question to the people around the table. On average, it was sitting around between 18 to 25, just in TA. And of that, most of them said about 10% of them were integrated with their core. They were all point solutions that we were using. Now, I love tech, but it is not the silver bullet. Okay, so when we think about a problem, I have a lot of clients who've come to me and said, "Hi, can you help us actually write a business case to buy this piece of technology?" I go, "Well, great. Why do you want to buy this technology?" They said, "Well, everyone else is buying this technology. We don't want to be left behind." I go, "Well, okay, well, that's interesting, but that's not exactly the reason why you should be doing it. What you should be doing is obsessing over the problem." So we've talked a bit about this as well. I think if you're looking at trying to build a business case to go and buy, and I think Rob's presentation was fantastic in terms of building that business case and getting the buy-in internally, you really should be thinking about how ready your business is to even go on that journey itself. So if you're not looking at it through the lens of both a tech, people, mindset, and process perspective, you're not going to achieve the uplift, experience, and the outcomes that you're looking for. Below there, below there is an equation actually that Jason Averbrook from LeapGen and Mercer use quite a lot, and I love this, which is about this digital equation for success. So a disproportionate amount of time spent on both mindset, behaviours, and people and skills. So have we got the mindset of the business right? Are we ready to go on and embark on this journey? And do we have the capability to actually embrace what it is we're going to use? Because the reality is, we see time and time again, and we were having this chat over dinner last night, time and time again, people putting technologies into their businesses and no one actually using them effectively. It's sitting there as a tool over the side, and no one's really tapping into it. And this is very much the case with AI tech. And I think the other piece I would say there, and we're going to talk a bit more about experience design in a second, but change in comms is absolutely critical when we look at that as well. All right, so how do we design the right tech solution? Well, the reality is what you need to be designing is for an hour of work or a today of work. You should be looking at your talent strategy and thinking about your operating model as well. Now, I'm not going to spend time talking about that top line, but I do want to call out the fact that if you don't have a talent strategy, that's where you should be thinking and focusing. So looking at where you are today and where are you trying to go into the future and how does that align with your overall business strategy at the same time. What I do want to talk about, though, is the bottom four. So I want to double-click on systems purpose and integration. I'm going to talk a bit more about AI and machine intelligence. I'm going to actually reference a few different vendors, but I want to take both sides of the equation. I want to look at it through your lenses, in terms of from a TA practitioner perspective, but I also want to look at it through the candidate's lens, and what are they using, and what are the implications of what they're using into your processes and what that might mean around your decisions as well. Then I want to spend a bit of time talking about experience and moments that matter, and then I'm going to finish on processes around who does what work where. And I won't spend a lot of time on that because Rebecca's pretty much shown all the ideas of what I was thinking on that anyway, but I'm going to double click on it and just make some references to it. So first of all, let's start around purpose. So I like this slide quite a lot. I use it a lot. And when I think about tech stacks, more specifically, I think about it in the context of purpose and layers. Now, there's always going to need a data and compliance layer. So you're going to need to have your core HR system, you're going to need to have a core ATS system, and ideally, if they're the same system, or if they're not the same system, they need to be connecting really effectively. Now, they serve a really, really important purpose there. Now, there's been a lot of talk more recently with customers around the importance of actually getting back to optimizing what you've got and addressing the foundations of what you have. And that's really where this core data and compliance layer falls into it. That being said, you're going to need enabling tools to solve for particular point solutions. So that might be assessments, background checking, benefits. Now, some of those other products may have some of those capabilities as well, but may not necessarily meet your objectives. So you may go out to market to look for those. What we're seeing a lot more happening now, though, is this concept of augmentation. So I talked about before, Workday, SAP, Oracle, I hate it, I don't want it, I want to augment it with something else. Well, we're starting to see more and more of this layer appearing of the experience, skills, and intelligence layer. Now, I mentioned earlier about convergence. So SmartRecruiters, for example, they've got a fantastic CRM within their product, along with their ATS as well. So you may not necessarily need a product that's going to serve across the top, but you do need something that can actually start to address some of the challenges across that. And that's really looking at it through, how do I attract talent? And then when I've got my internal talent, how do I understand them and have visibility and what I can do to bring them along their career paths and their journey as well. The reason why this gets really interesting is thinking about it in the context of data and thinking about it in the context of ontologies as well, particularly at the skills level. Now, that being said, what we are beginning to see a lot more emergence of, well, not a lot more emergence, early emergence of, is this concept of the custom AI brain as well. And this is really where you can start to bring in organisational context through data, and particularly skills data, across multiple platforms, bring that back into single view, and then use that to power back out the insights into other solutions that you're spending your time within. I'm a big believer that, and I think I coined this phrase over a cocktail in Vegas, was that the best AI is no UI. It should be operating behind the scenes and surfacing information to where you actually do your work. Now, all of this is predicated on integration. And Rob talked about integration before, which was really insightful around some of their journeys and challenges there. I think classically what we see, and as Rich said, I used to work for LiveHire as a SmartRecruiters competitor, and there was always, I always find that the sales guys, I don't know if there's any sales guys in there, I hope they're not, but they would always say, client would say, hey, is it integrated with this platform? They say, yep. And the client would go, great, awesome, tick that box, excellent, move on to the next question. Now, the reality is, once you actually implement something, and this is not just a LiveHire thing, not bagging LiveHire, LiveHire's a bloody great product, right? But this is the case with so many different products out there, is that what you don't do is you don't ask the next questions, because you don't know what the next questions are to ask. So here's a few that you could take away and think about. Take a photo, go nuts. But I would always try to get a sense on what are the vendor's actual integration capabilities like. So you say it's integrated, great. Is it a one-way integration? Like, are you just sending data that way, or are you just getting data from them here as well? Is it two-way? What's the format that it's coming across? How often is that happening as well? So you may have an integration where it only passes overnight, so that's not going to be useful if you need to ensure that you've got the insights there on that particular day. So you don't find that out until after you implement it. That gets really frustrating. Whose actual job is it to build the integration as well? Is it the vendors? Is there a cost? Is it IT's? There's going to be a lot more cost. Or is it a systems implementation partner as well? And who's going to maintain it? How are you aware if there's going to be errors or issues that happen at the same time? And then also, what's its purpose? Like, what are you going to use the data for, and why is it going across that system to serve what purpose as well? So there's some things that I would typically suggest when you're having that conversation with a vendor. Ask the next 2 to 3 to 4 questions to understand capability when it comes to integration. All right, that's systems, purpose, and integration. Now I want to talk about the unicorn spewing rainbows, because this is what it feels like at the moment. Yeah? We're all talking AI. I was sitting on a train going into the city in Melbourne the other day, and there was a couple sitting next to me. They were I'm going to go, they're in their mid-80s. And both of them spent the whole train trip just talking about ChatGPT. And I would never have thought that would ever happen, but they were absolutely obsessed by it. They thought it was the best thing since sliced bread. I don't know what they were using it for, but anyway. what I would say, lots of things. What I would say, though, is that those... God, I keep hitting my microphone, sorry about that. What I would say is those who actually embrace it correctly are going to thrive, but have you really thought it through? Now, if you look at Gartner's hype cycle at the moment, I'm not sure if you guys have seen this before, everything that is sitting in the innovation arena there at the moment is all AI-enabled focus, and this is all for talent acquisition. So there's a whole bunch of hype cycles that Gartner have. This is a TA one specifically. And you can see there that most of them are focused around the AI-enabled, whether it be skills, interview intelligence, sourcing, generative AI. We're kind of really at the start of that journey. There are a few there that are getting towards the peak, though, at the same time. And you can see there's a whole bunch of what we now kind of fall into the trough of disillusionment there in the middle when we think about things like talent assessments or programmatic job advertising. So there's a lot of focus, and I think Rebecca's presentation earlier was a great case study of that around where there is going to be ongoing investment when you start looking at the product itself. But when we think about the adoption of AI, there's a pretty large delta between the candidates and how they're actually adopting it at the moment and how corporates are actually adopting it currently. So this is research on the left-hand side. That 72% of applicants currently are using generative AI. This is from Arctic Shores. They're an assessment technology. And they had actually undertaken this research in partnership with University College of London. And so I'm going to talk a bit more about that in a second. But this other stat there is from a research report from Sapient Group about 3 weeks ago, which looks at actually, well, from corporate HR teams, including TA, how much of them are actually using AI within their solution there at the moment. Now, I don't have a fancy poll, but I'm going to go for a show of hands just for a moment. And so can I just get you to put your hands up quickly if you've used generative AI, ChatGPT, Bard, etc., if you've played with it, if you've had a crack with it in your roles to do your work. So it's pretty much the entire room. Right, I want you to keep your hand up if you're using it daily. And I mean absolutely every day to do your work, to do your jobs within TA. Okay, so it's probably around about 25, about a quarter of the room. Okay, you put your hands down. Thank you. So that's really interesting that we're in a position where we can experiment, which is great, but we're kind of not in a process yet of actually adapting and adopting it. And maybe that's because our processes haven't actually caught up to it. But I think probably one of the other key reasons there is it's actually really complicated to get the sign-off internally within our enterprises to make sure that we can use it in the right way. So these are the 4 different dimensions that organisations will look at when thinking about the use of AI within your businesses. There'll be a technical dimension there, which is really looking at, well, what was the source and the use of the data? So where have they actually got this data by which to produce the insights? How was the model actually built? There's going to be the legal framework lens there as well. So does it actually meet the regulations and guidelines? Now, in Australia, we still operate under a guideline as opposed to a law. That's evolving and being looked at, but more and more we're seeing legislation and AI acts beginning to form. So we've seen that in the EU, got New York State's legislation there as well, and similarly with Joe Biden actually signing a presidential decree only about a month or so ago around how we want to start looking at and using responsible AI. I think there's an ethical part there, which is about how the results are actually going to be used, and also there's a question around, is it the right thing to do, full stop, anyway. Now, that being said, there is a lot of fantastic AI, well, what Josh Bersin would call built-on AI solutions out there in the market. Here's a snapshot of a few of them. I won't spend very long on this, but what I would say is that there are some fantastic solutions out there in the market at the moment that are really driving high value and high efficiency gain for a lot of businesses out there at the moment. I'll give you one very simple example, which I love. There's a whole bunch of AI note takers out there. There are more products that are building it natively within their solution. What I saw, though, was essentially they can record the transcript of the interview as though you're having the interview live over Teams or over Zoom. That's easy. It can actually summarize those and have actions. That's actually pretty straightforward. A lot of those tools do that as well. But what they've done that's taken it another step, which is really interesting, is that if the hiring manager had actually asked questions that they weren't allowed to ask in the interview, it will red flag that and then actually automatically nudge them with a learning intervention straight after it. Not bad, is it? Saves a few lawsuits, which is always nice. So there's a lot of interesting products in TA. But at the same time, there's a lot of products that candidates are using out there at the moment as well. There's a heap of different products that candidates are using to actually create applications, create the resumes, the cover letters, etc. The one on the right, though, is actually the one that's a really interesting one. It's from a tech business called Final Round. I think Gareth actually posted about it a few days ago. What this will do is that when you're doing an interview, it will actually grab what the interviewer is asking as a question in real time. It will automatically use generative AI to provide answers to those questions. And then as they ask additional probing questions, the generative AI will actually provide more answers and more framework. Now, one thing I will say here is that looking at the actual video, and I'd encourage you, feel free to search it up, Final Round. There's a guy who's actually recorded himself doing this, using this particular tool for this interview. It felt a little bit awkward to start with. And so when we were talking about this internally and watching this video, the question really started to get raised around, okay, well, hang on, what are you actually buying? So if they're using tools like this, what are you actually buying? Are you buying the AI? Are you buying the robot? Are you buying the person? Are you buying an augmented version of the person? So I think we're in a really sort of interesting, challenging state right now from a TA function when you think about these applications for how they're being used. I would argue on the same flip side of that, though, is it does show some level of resourcefulness in terms of them using these applications by which to help them undertake the work that they're doing. I had a guy who was working for me back when I was at Livehire for a while. We were using SharePoint. I hate SharePoint so much. And it just looked horrible and ugly, and I said, is there a way we can make it look better? So it feels more like a hub where there's more accessible information. I went out for lunch, came back, and he'd already changed it. And I said, Johnny, how the hell did you change that already? What did you do? And he said, I just watched a couple of YouTube videos and I did a bit of research and then figured out how to do it and I just made the change. I said, holy shit, that's incredible. I said, that would have taken me months to figure that out. So I think there is this element that these are tools. And I think there is this element here where they are being resourceful and thinking about the tools at their disposals to actually make themselves more effective. All of that being said, what does it mean for assessments? And this is coming back to the Arctic Shores research. So I think there are a few different assessment types that I think are largely at risk of maintaining their relevance. And if you look at what generative AI can be used for in these products itself, so what they tested and what we looked at through the research was that for verbal reasoning, generative AI essentially can generate a 98% accuracy match as well as what a human would do. And for situational judgment, it came in about the 75th percentile. So I think the thing that I would say here is that I would encourage you to think about not the fact of whether we use assessments or not. I'd be thinking about the type of assessments you're using and how you're designing that into the work that you're doing and the roles that they're playing. More and more, we're seeing task-based assessments becoming the ability for me to actually understand whether the person can do the job or not, versus just relying on situational judgment or on verbal reasoning. We're seeing an increased focus around bringing people back face-to-face, more case studies, from that regard as well. So some sort of design considerations for you when you think about AI, is I would really be trying to understand what are the use cases and its purpose, where is the data being sourced from, and I would definitely challenge yourself around the advantages and limitations of it as well. There is a huge amount of opportunities, but there are a huge amount of challenges that you should think about and consider at the same time as well. On that assessment piece there as well, there is a classic, and also on the candidate there with Final Round, there is a classic initial reaction, which is, screw it, let's just block it. Which is actually what happened, if you remember. I think, I hope you don't mind me saying this, Rob, but I think KPMG were one of the earlier ones to block generative AI straight out of the gate. So that's it, we're blocking it, no one's allowed to use it. and then suddenly built a lot more capability and then opened that back up again. I think it's natural human behaviour that if you have something that is fearful driven, that you just want to turn it off, block it, let it go, don't want to look at it. So whether you want to detect it, whether you want to deter it, or whether you want to design it, I think that's probably where you should be thinking about. And we would absolutely encourage you to think about how you design AI into your processes, not just implementing it and hoping that it's going to solve all your problems. All right, in the last few minutes, I want to talk a bit about a few other things here. So when we think about moments that matter, we would say that when you look at experience design and thinking about over-indexing and over-investing in moments that matter, where most of that has been occurring is all up this kind of, reddy, orangey end. So it's all focused around internal workforce, culture, development, events, etc. So how do we ensure that they have a fantastic experience at work? And that's what they should be doing. What we would also say is that it's ridiculously underinvested in the TA space. And I think largely it's always seen as an afterthought, and we actually feel that the reason for that is it's viewed as a process. And in fact, we did an onboarding experience design workshop with a customer recently, and every time we were talking about experience and we're trying to actually design this out with the customer, the TA people in the room brought everything back to back to process and not experience. And we would say, okay, well, that's really interesting, but what you're talking about there is process, not experience. So I think there's this part here where we're a little bit at fault ourselves, because that's kind of how we've always been, where we've been focusing, but there is a massive opportunity to look at what you're trying to achieve and where those moments that matter are throughout the life cycle. And then I think there's an opportunity for you to think about who's doing what in relation to that. Now, this is actually an exercise we did with a customer last year, professional services firm. For those at the back who may not be able to see all of that on the screen, just to kind of walk you through it. So we essentially wanted to map, within the process of TA itself, what was human and what was machine. And so top here on the left, we had what was a high-touch human moment, what was a low-touch human moment, and then also what was a machine touch. So high at the bottom there, low in the middle. So we essentially had a convergence coming between both human and machine there in the middle. The dots represent different actors. So recruiter-related processes are black, blue are the hiring managers, and red were the candidates. Now this, just as a context, was a white-collar environment. And we really wanted to ensure permanent hires, and they were very much knowledge workers. So we wanted to ensure that there were lots of high-touch human moments there. I had somebody recently say to me, well, hang on, we're a retailer in high volume. Surely we can automate all that. Like we don't need, we essentially want to create as much efficiency as possible. We don't want any human touch moments. I said, yeah, totally, you could totally do that. But at the cost of what? And I think that's probably the key question we want to ask ourselves when we think about experience design and we think about technology and the role that it's playing is at the cost of what? And I think there's lots of opportunities there. Last section, and then I'll close out. But last section, which I think, once again, I think Rebecca spoke to this incredibly well. The comment that I would make, though, and what we see time and time again with customers when we speak to hiring leaders particularly and the business, is they don't give a shit about our systems. We love them. Like, we love our ATS, we love our HR, well, we don't love our HRS as much as we love our ATS. We love our CRMs, we love to get paid, but the reality is the hiring leaders don't really care about it. So bring the work to them. Let them hang out where they hang out, bring the task and the opportunities to them. That will save you a lot of time, it'll reduce bottlenecks, you'll get more efficiency, but there's a great opportunity for bots to play a role with that. I think Rebecca articulated that incredibly well earlier, and what she showed was even better. So really excited in terms of where that's going to go for you guys. I think I said to her as I was walking out that I'm sure Rich will just get lots of calls around, great, when's that feature going to be ready? No pressure. But I would be definitely thinking about connectivity to Teams and Slack, because that's the reality of where lots of communication and conversation actually happens and occurs. Right, so to close out. So if there was any key takeaways I would give you, it would be these three. So obsess over the problem, not the tech, and be purposeful in the design of your AI and also the experience that you're looking to create. Design who does what work where and why. And then I want to finish on a quote. I said I'd finish on a little bit of hope. And I love this quote by Fifi Lee, who is a vice president at Google, and she's also a Stanford professor. And it's the fact that artificial intelligence is not a substitute for human intelligence. It's a tool to amplify human creativity and ingenuity. Thank you, Bill.